Welcome back now for the news in detail. The United States has told India to fulfill promises to better the lives of the people in occupied Kashmir. The White House says the crisis in the valley was discussed at length yesterday by President Donald Trump and Indian Prime Minister Modi. According to a White House statement, Trump told Modi to improve India's relations with Pakistan. The American president said the world is counting on Pakistan and India to resolve tensions. Meeting with Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan on Monday, Trump reiterated his offer of mediation on the Kashmir issue. The US president said there is always a solution to disputes. Prime Minister Khan has said the US can use its influence to end the humanitarian crisis in Indian-occupied Kashmir. In India, Ghulam Nabi Azad, leader of the opposition in the upper house of parliament, says the situation in occupied Kashmir is terrible. Azad says his recent tour of Kashmir was severely curbed by Indian occupation authorities. This report has more.
Since illegally annexing occupied Kashmir on August 5th, India's government has turned the valley into a fortress. Even opposition leaders of the world's so-called largest democracy have not been allowed to visit. Senior Congress Party politician Ghulam Nabi Azad had to petition the Supreme Court to gain access to his own homeland. Speaking in Jammu after a 6-day tour, Azad said occupied Kashmir is under a crushing lockdown. Despite the Supreme Court's ruling, occupation authorities prevented him from visiting most of the valley.
I was not even allowed by the administration to visit 10% of the places where I had planned to go in the valley during my stay there. There is no sign of freedom of speech in Jammu and Kashmir.
Congress leader Azad criticized the arrests of Kashmiri politicians and New Delhi's ban on political activities in the valley. Congress leader Azad said he will soon submit a report on the situation in occupied Kashmir to the Indian Supreme Court. The New Delhi imposed curfew and communications blackout in the occupied Kashmir is now in its 52nd consecutive day.
Calling the lockdown in Indian-occupied Kashmir an open jail, Prime Minister Imran Khan says the world has failed to uphold the rights of Kashmiris. Prime Minister Khan was addressing a press conference on the sidelines of the United Nations General Assembly session that is currently underway in New York. This report has the details.
Prime Minister Imran Khan highlighted the mass arrests of Kashmiris and their relocation to the secret jails elsewhere. He spoke of hospitals not working, the crushing curfew, and his concerns that a massacre could take place if the curfew is lifted.
Just to remind the world that there are 11 Security Council, UN Security Council resolutions that recognize Kashmir as a disputed territory and which gave the right to people of Kashmir the right of self-determination through a plebiscite to decide their destiny. That right has been given to the people of Kashmir for 70 years.
Khan added, India today is governed by a racist Hindu supremacist party influenced by the RSS ideology, which is pursuing state terrorism. He added, this can sow the seeds of radicalization and instability in the region. The Prime Minister said the world needs to address the Kashmir issue.
I'm alarmed, and I think the world leaders need to know. I've spoken to the world leaders. I've spoken to President Trump. I've spoken to Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister. On telephone, I've spoken to Angela Merkel, to President Macron of France. I've spoken to the Muslim leaders. And this is the time for the world to act before this goes too far.
Meanwhile, PM Khan hosted a dinner for a delegation of OIC contact group on Kashmir at New York. He said after the UN session, he will take the issue to the OIC summit.
Pakistan has asked the UN Security Council to act urgently and decisively after India illegally annexed occupied Kashmir status. In a letter to President Vasily Nebenzia, Foreign Minister Shah Mahmood Qureshi said India's actions in occupied Kashmir have jeopardized regional peace and stability. Qureshi said Pakistan is committed to pursuing peaceful avenues to address the growing crisis, but Indian occupation forces are escalating tensions at the line of control to divert international attention from its atrocities in the valley. Qureshi said the people of Indian-occupied Kashmir await the free and impartial plebiscite conducted under the auspices of UN. He said India agreed to hold the plebiscite under Security Council resolutions 70 years ago. A fact-finding report by Indian women activists has exposed Indian military's atrocities and brutalities in occupied Kashmir. The report was presented by activists from the Communist Party of India, Muslims Women's Forum and National Federation of Indian Women. The five-member group visited the valley from September 17th to 21st and presented eyewitness accounts of the lockdown. The report said 13,000 boys have been abducted by Indian troops and families have no information about them. It said revocation of Article 370 has united the people of Kashmir and they are ready to fight against Indian annexation. The activists have demanded the restoration of Article 370, release of all those detained and removal of Indian troops from civilian areas. Pakistan says it is working to defuse tensions in the Gulf at the request of the United States and Saudi Arabia. Prime Minister Imran Khan says he has discussed possibilities with Iran's President Hassan Rouhani. The two leaders met on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly. Talking to media at the UN, Khan said it is too early to say anything conclusive about the success of his talks.
De-escalate the situation. President Trump asked me that if we could de-escalate the situation and maybe come up with another deal. So I did convey this, and yes, we are trying our best. It's an ongoing thing, so I can't reveal more than that.
Talking to reporters, US President Donald Trump confirmed he had asked Pakistan's Prime Minister Khan to act as a mediator with Iran. Trump said he has a very good relationship with Pakistan's Prime Minister. Now moving on, France says conditions are now ripe for a meeting between US President Donald Trump and Iran's President Hassan Rouhani. President Emmanuel Macron says it is now up to them to make it happen. Macron says he worked on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly to arrange a face-to-face meeting between Trump and Rouhani. Speaking to reporters in New York, Macron said he will continue efforts to salvage the 2015 Iran nuclear deal.
Le Président Trump.
France is ready to help, and I consider that this discussion must begin between the United States and Iran, and it must be able to involve all the signatories of the JCPOA nuclear accord and the regional powers.
Et donc il veut s'assurer.
The French president has spearheaded recent European diplomatic efforts to reduce tensions between the United States and Iran. Now moving on to Britain, which has stressed the need for dialogue to map out the successor pact to the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Prime Minister Boris Johnson has met with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani at the UN General Assembly in New York. Johnson invited Rouhani to London, where the pair could discuss things more. He raised concerns about Iran's destabilizing activity in the region. Referring to the attacks on Saudi oil facilities, Johnson insisted such activities must stop. He also called for the immediate release of dual UK-Iranian nationals imprisoned in Iran. Boris Johnson will face Parliament today after its suspension was ruled out unlawful by the Supreme Court. Following the ruling, Johnson is returning early from the United Nations General Assembly in New York. Prime Minister Johnson said he profoundly disagreed with the Supreme Court's decision, but will respect it. There are growing calls for Johnson to resign because he unlawfully advised the Queen to prorogue. Parliament, the opposition Labour Party has cut short its annual conference to attend Parliament. House of Commons Speaker John Bercow has promised there will be full scope for questions and ministerial statements. The UK's Labour Party leader Jeremy Corbyn says his priority is legislating to avert a no-deal Brexit. Corbyn says opposition will then call a vote of no confidence against Prime Minister Boris Johnson to force him to resign. The opposition leader said Johnson should apologise to Queen Elizabeth and to the people of Britain. Corbyn called out the Prime Minister after the Supreme Court ruled his Parliament suspension as unlawful.
I think the government would have had a lot of advice from its own lawyers that to prorogue Parliament for the longest period for 300 years would be questionable, particularly after the Prime Minister had failed to give any undertaking that he would abide by the law Parliament had just passed to prevent us leaving the European Union without any deal.
Well, coming up next in the Bulletin after a short break is... City faces risk of climate-driven flooding. And jellification of the world's oceans. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The U.S. House Democrats have launched a formal impeachment inquiry against President Donald Trump. Speaker Nancy Pelosi says the president violated his oath by asking Ukraine's help to smear Democratic rival Joe Biden ahead of next year's election. Pelosi says President Trump must be held accountable for violating national security and the integrity of U.S. elections. Trump quickly fired off 4 tweets in response, calling the inquiry another Democratic witch hunt. On Monday, Biden admitted that as vice president, he had pressured Ukraine into sacking its top prosecutor for investigating his son. The U.S. military says it has killed 11 suspected ISIS militants in an airstrike in southern Libya. The director of U.S. Africa Command, Major General William Gaylor, said it was the Pentagon's second raid this week. In a statement, Gaylor said the airstrike was conducted overnight to destroy the ability of ISIS to attack Libyan people. The attack follows a raid on 19th September that the U.S. claimed killed 8 suspected militants. The Pentagon said it will not allow terrorists to exploit fighting between rival Libyan factions. Moving on, Egypt and Qatar have traded bombs over Libya at the UN General Assembly, complicating the body's push for peace in North Africa. Qatar backs the UN-backed government while Egypt supports rival forces commanded by Khalifa Haftar. In his address to the United Nations, Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said there had to be a concerted effort to stop militias from taking control of Libya. It said the conflict needs to be stopped and support from external forces thwarted. Speaking shortly afterwards, Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani accused Haftar's forces of carrying out war crimes with impunity. It said Haftar is conducting attacks with the support of countries that are undermining the government and United Nations peace efforts. Meanwhile, 7 people have been killed and 46 others injured by an oil tanker explosion in Mali. The accident happened after the tanker's driver lost control and the vehicle rolled over on a highway in the capital, Bamako. Officials say the tanker was carrying 14,000 liters of fuel at the time. The 46 people injured in the accident are being treated at local hospitals. The Civil Defense Ministry says an inquiry into the crash is underway. Over to Turkey, where 5 people have been injured in a terrorist attack on a bus in southern Adana province. Officials say a roadside bomb exploded next to the bus while it was traveling in Yüreğir district near Turkey's Mediterranean coast. The bus was carrying police personnel. Adana's governor says 4 civilians and a policeman were injured in the attack. It says the victims did not sustain serious injuries. Several nearby vehicles and buildings were also damaged in the blast. Meanwhile, Turkish security forces have killed 3 terrorists in southeastern Sirnak province. Security operations are still underway in the region. Now, another Indian Air Force MiG-21 warplane has crashed, underlining its reputation as a flying coffin. The MiG-21 training jet went down near the central Indian city of Gwalior. Both pilots ejected and were uninjured. The MiG-21 Bison is notorious for being accident-prone because of its obsolete technology. India's media has reported 26 MiG-21s have crashed since 2015. Since the warplane was inducted into service in the 1970s, 170 Indian pilots and 40 civilians have been killed in accidents. Government data shows that the Indian Air Force has lost half of its 872 MiG-21s over the last 40 years. Also in India, coastal megacities like Mumbai face a catastrophic risk of climate-driven flooding. The shanty dwellers of its coastal areas fear for their homes and lives. This report has more.
During the monsoon, rainstorms regularly flood the slums of Mumbai, Asia's biggest, leaving hundreds of people vulnerable. For densely populated cities like Mumbai, such disasters are a threat to personal incomes as well as national economies.
If water levels rise, I don't think any part of Mumbai will be safe. Mumbai is an island and there is only one way out, and even tall buildings won't be safe. It's dangerous and worrying for our children's future and leaves every family living here at God's mercy.
Forestry officer D.R. Patel wades through knee-deep water to plant mangroves and trees, the only protection they have at the moment.
If we lose mangroves, there will be major flooding as water ingress will happen as sea level rises and water seeps into the city, causing human casualties and flooding.
Critics say India's largest metropolis is not doing enough to hold back the waves. The Maharashtra Maritime Board says coastal management plans have been initiated in the region but will take time.
We have to go for a stepwise approach, but because our challenges are also multi-faced resources, and with population the demand on the resources is more. So therefore our solutions also have to be, there is always a cost benefit analysis when you implement a particular solution.
UN studies show sea at Mumbai could rise by 1 meter in the next century because of the global warming. If the prediction comes true, one academic report suggests a quarter of Mumbai could be affected.
Children in India have a brave journey to over 14 kilometers to steal water from railway taps for their families. They have to go far in the absence of any provisions by the government. Watch this report to know how.
In India's poorest village of Mukandwadi in Maharashtra, children miss school for a 14-kilometer return train journey to fetch water. India's monsoons have brought abundant rain in many parts of the country, but rainfall here has been 14% below average this year. The natural aquifers and borewells are dry. In overcrowded trains, a small group of children isn't always welcome and have to face bullies.
We hide from the police. The moment we see them, we hide. We never go in front of them. We close the door and then fill the water.
A water tanker costs up to $42 during the summers, unaffordable for most of the people in the area. People worry for their children's future as they have to go alone. Children also feel that they are missing a vital part of their childhood, but remain steadfast despite all the difficulties.
I go to the school at 8 a.m. and come back at 1 p.m. and at 4 p.m. I go to get water. After I come back, I sit down to study. I don't get any time to play.
According to the UK-based charity WaterAid, some 163 million people do not have access to clean water, the biggest proportion of any country.
Many animal species are endangered or facing extinction because of human activity. But others are thriving because of our impact on this planet, including jellyfish. Scientists are calling this phenomena the jellification of the world's oceans. This report has details on how jellyfish population is rising.
Jellyfish have been on this planet for far longer than we have. It's believed they have roamed the Earth's oceans for around 600 million years. And now they're even more at home thanks to climate change, plastic waste and overfishing.
Jellyfish reproduce when major changes in temperature occur. That's what stimulates their reproduction. So climate change causing an increase in ocean temperatures will help jellyfish reproduction, so they'll reproduce more and more.
Like several other marine species, jellyfish also feed on plankton, and as such their rising population could negatively impact the ocean's ecosystems.
We will also see more and more of them because they will have fewer and fewer predators, again because of climate change, but also because of overfishing. Turtles will disappear, tuna fish, all of which are natural predators of jellyfish.
Apart from climate change and fishing, jellyfish are also helped by plastic waste. Even a few centimeters of plastic trash can serve as a breeding colony for the jellyfish species. This could have tragic consequences, as stings from several jellyfish species can be lethal.
Now, China's President Xi Jinping has formally opened Beijing's new Daxing International Airport. The $63 billion showpiece is the world's largest single terminal building. The inauguration precedes the 70th anniversary of the founding of the People's Republic of China. Designed by famed Iraqi-born architect Zaha Hadid, the new airport boasts 4 runways. It is expected to handle up to 72 million passengers a year by 2025. Covering an area equivalent to 98 football fields, the starfish-shaped airport will boost Beijing infrastructure growth. Dior went back to nature in Paris Fashion Week show with Greta Thunberg plates and a garden-inspired collection. With climate change biting at the industry's heels and protests at London's Fashion Week, Dior showcased fashion uniquely. More on Paris Fashion Week in this report.
To honor the environment, designer Maria Grazia Chiori embraced the wild with hemp gardening jackets and a series of diaphanous dresses embroidered with wildflowers. The Italian designer also pushed the couture boundaries by using hemp and raffia in eye-catching, unusual ways.
There is still a huge media echo around a fashion show, and we captured part of this media echo to really say that now everyone is aware that we have to do things.
Chiori says her new collection is not only to keep up with the label's industry image, but also to emphasize the need to take action on climate change.
So these are trees. It's symbolic, but it also goes with part of the recycling of the whole decor. It's time to say when it's over, then what? The years when we just took and threw things away are over.
The 160 trees, which form the centerpiece of the show, will be replanted in the French capital. Started on the 23rd of September, Paris Fashion Week will continue until the 1st of October.
In business stories, global stock markets have dipped in response to the launch of an impeachment inquiry against US President Donald Trump. International oil futures are trading 1.5% lower. In Europe, the CAC index in Paris has lost 1.25%. Frankfurt's DAX index has also shed 1%. London's FTSE 100 is 0.75% down. In Asia, Hong Kong's Hang Seng and the Kospi Index in Seoul closed down nearly 1.5%. The Shanghai Composite also lost 1%. Now let's have a look at the weather update. With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For more news and updates, keep watching Indus News.